The desert held its breath in the hour before dawn. No wind moved through the cottonwoods along the Gila River. No animal called from the rocks above. The world waited suspended in that fragile darkness before the sun could burn it all away again. Owen McCrae crouched beside the river, his hands working the wire of a fish trap he'd set the night before. The water ran cold over his fingers. His breath made small clouds in the air. At 41 years old, he moved like a man much older, each motion careful, measured, as if he were testing the weight of his own body against the earth. He had learned to move quietly. The desert taught that lesson to everyone who lived long enough. But this morning, something made him pause. His fingers stilled on the trap wire. His head came up listening. Water sounds, that was all. The steady murmur of current over stone. But underneath it, something else. A rhythm that didn't belong, splashing. Not the splash of a fish or a wading bird. Something larger. Something struggling. Owen stood. His hand went to the pistol at his hip, a motion so practiced he no longer thought about it. He lifted the small lantern he'd brought, turning up the wick until yellow light spilled across the water. That's when he saw her. A woman. Floating face down in the shallows, arms spread wide, hair fanning out like dark wings in the current, blood in the water, black in the lamplight spreading from her head in slow spirals. Owen didn't think. He crashed into the river, the cold hitting him like a fist. 3 strides, and he reached her, grabbing her shoulders, turning her over. Her eyes were open. She was alive. Her lips moved. A word in a language he didn't speak. Then, in English, accented, barely a whisper. Ayazi. War. Her eyes rolled back. Her body went slack in his arms. Owen looked up and down the riverbank. Empty. Dark. Whoever had done this could still be close, could be watching right now. He should leave her, ride back to his ranch, pretend he'd never come to check the traps this morning, but he was already lifting her out of the water, already carrying her toward the bank, already making the choice he'd sworn he'd never make again, to get involved. The ride back to his ranch took 20 minutes. Owen pushed his horse harder than he should have, one arm wrapped around the woman to keep her from falling. She didn't wake, didn't make a sound, just a dead weight against his chest, her wet clothes soaking into his shirt. By the time he reached the cabin, the sky had started to lighten, that pale gray that came before true dawn. Owen dismounted, pulled the woman down, carried her inside. His cabin was small, 1 room. A table, a chair, a narrow bed against the wall, a stove in the corner, shelves with canned goods and ammunition. Nothing that suggested comfort, nothing that suggested company. He laid her on the bed, lit the lamp on the table. In the better light he could see her more clearly now. Apache. He knew that immediately. The way her hair was cut, the style of her torn dress, the beadwork on her belt. She was maybe 28, maybe 30, hard to tell. Life on the reservation had both aged and preserved her, but her eyes were older, eyes that had seen too much. Her face was bruised, split lip, a gash across her forehead that had bled heavily but was already starting to clot. Owen fetched water, clean cloth, whiskey for disinfecting. His hands moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Clean the wound. Check for other injuries. Wrap what needed wrapping. Don't think about who she was or how she'd ended up in the river. Just do the work. He was cleaning the blood from her forehead when her eyes opened. For a moment, neither of them moved. Owen froze, cloth in hand, inches from her face. The woman stared up at him. Her eyes were black, flat, showing nothing. Then she moved. Fast. Faster than he'd expected. Her hand shot out, grabbing the knife he'd left on the bedside table. She came up swinging the blade aimed at his throat. Owen jerked back. The knife missed by inches. He raised his hands, palms out, showing empty. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't lower the knife. She slid off the bed, putting her back to the wall, keeping the blade between them. Her breathing was harsh, ragged, but her hand didn't shake. "I pulled you out of the river," Owen said. His voice was low, calm, the voice he used with spooked horses. You were dying. I brought you here." "Where is here?" Her English was good, accented but clear. "My ranch, Gila River Valley, about 8 miles from Bitter Creek." Her eyes moved around the room, taking in the space, the door, the window, calculating distances, escape routes. "What do you want?" she asked. "Nothing." "Everyone wants something." Owen lowered his hands slowly. "You can leave if you want. I won't stop you. But you're hurt. And whoever put you in that river might still be looking. You'll be safer here, at least until daylight." She studied his face, really looked at him for the first time. Her eyes moved from his face to his hands to the scar on his wrist. The old arrow wound white against tanned skin. Something changed in her expression. Recognition. "You," she said. Not a question. A statement. Owen felt his stomach drop. "Do I know you? You don't remember." "Remember what?" She took a step closer, the knife still raised, her eyes locked on his. "Skeleton Canyon. 15 years ago. You were there. You were there." The name hit him like a physical blow. Owen's face went blank, carefully blank, the expression of a man who'd practiced not showing anything. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." She pointed the knife at his wrist. "That scar, from an arrow. You got it there, that night." Owen's hand moved instinctively to cover the scar. An old habit, one he hadn't even known he still had. "Who are you?" "My name is Denali. I was 13 years old when you came to my village, when you burned everything, when you killed my father." The room felt suddenly smaller, airless. Owen took a step back, then another. His legs hit the chair and he sat down hard, not because he chose to, but because they wouldn't hold him anymore. "I didn't kill anyone at Skeleton Canyon," he said, but his voice sounded hollow even to himself. "You were there. That's enough." They stared at each other across the small room. The lamp flickered. Outside, the first birds started to call, greeting the sun that was just beginning to touch the eastern hills. Finally, Owen spoke. "How did you end up in the river?" Denali lowered the knife slightly. Not all the way, just enough to show she was willing to talk. "I was running from men with guns. I jumped in to lose them, hit my head on a rock." "What men?" "Bounty hunters, led by a man named Luther Price." Owen's face went even more blank at that name. "Luther." "You know him. We served together in the army." Owen stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the growing light. "Why is Luther hunting you?" "Because I killed a man." Owen turned. Denali met his eyes. No shame, no apology. "Who?" "An Indian agent, Virgil Crane, at San Carlos Reservation." She said it like a challenge, daring him to judge. "Why?" "Because he deserved it. Because he stole food from my people. Because children died while he got fat on government money. Because someone had to." Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Once. "You should sit down. You lost blood." "I don't want to sit." "Then stand." "But you're swaying." She was. Denali blinked, steadied herself against the wall. Owen crossed to the stove, added wood, started heating water for coffee. He kept his movement slow, unthreatening, giving her space. "How long until Luther comes here?" he asked. "I don't know. I covered my trail. But Luther is good. He'll find it eventually." "Then you need to leave before he does." "I know." But neither of them moved. They stood in that small cabin as the sun rose, two people bound together by violence neither could undo, waiting for the next violence to find them. The coffee boiled. Owen poured 2 cups, set one on the table within Denali's reach. She took it, finally lowering the knife. Her hands shook slightly as she raised the cup to her lips. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Owen didn't answer right away. He was remembering. Not trying to remember. The memories came anyway, the way they always did. Fragmentary, disconnected. Images without context. Fire, screaming, the smell of burning corn, a girl running through smoke, her hair flying behind her, Luther's voice shouting orders, the weight of a rifle in his hands, the taste of whiskey on his tongue thick and numbing. An arrow coming out of darkness. The sharp pain in his wrist. Blood running down his hand. "I don't know," he finally said. And it was true. He didn't know why he'd pulled her from the river instead of leaving her there. Didn't know why he'd brought her to his cabin instead of riding away. Maybe because she was the first person in 4 years who'd looked at him and seen what he really was. Not a quiet rancher, not a man who paid his bills and kept to himself, but a soldier who'd done terrible things and then run from them. "You let me go," Denali said quietly. "That night, at Skeleton Canyon, I remember now, you found me hiding. You had a gun. Luther told you to shoot me, but you didn't." Owen closed his eyes, a fragment of memory sharpening into focus. A girl with terrified eyes, his finger on the trigger. The whiskey making everything distant and unreal. Luther's voice. "Shoot her, McCrae. That's an order." And then Owen doing something he'd never been able to explain even to himself, firing into the air instead. Grabbing the girl, pushing her toward the darkness. "Run, run, and don't look back." "I was drunk," Owen said. "I was drunk most of that year, but you let me go. I got discharged for it. Dishonorable discharge in 1868. "Good." Owen opened his eyes. Denali was watching him with that same flat, assessing stare. "I didn't come here by accident," she said. "I knew you lived here. I've known for 2 years. "How?" I asked. I listened. "Apache women work in Bitter Creek. They hear things. They told me about the quiet white man who lives alone by the river, who used to be Army, who drinks coffee instead of whiskey now, who has a scar on his wrist." She set down her coffee cup. "I came here because I needed to know something. What if you'd changed? If the man who let me live could be trusted? And if I couldn't..." She picked up the knife again, didn't point it at him, just held it. "Then I would have left, or killed you. I hadn't decided." And now... Before she could answer, they both heard it. Horses, multiple riders, coming fast up the trail toward the cabin. Owen moved to the window. 5 men on horseback, maybe 200 yards out. He recognized the lead rider even at this distance. Luther Price, bigger than Owen remembered, harder, but the same cold eyes, the same way of sitting a horse like he owned everything he surveyed. "They found me," Denali said. She was already moving, checking the back window. "No, they found me." Owen's voice was grim. "Luther's not stupid. He knows we served together. He'll check everyone from the old unit." The riders were closer now, 100 yards. Owen could see the dust rising behind them. "You should hide," Owen said. "I don't hide." "Then you should run." "I'm tired of running." Owen looked at her, really looked at her, at the defiance in her eyes, the knife gripped in her hand, the way she stood back straight, ready to fight. She reminded him of something, or someone. Himself, maybe, before the whiskey and the running had worn him down to this quiet ghost. "If you stay, this goes bad," he said. "It's already bad." The horses stopped outside. Owen heard Luther's voice calling out, casual, friendly, the tone of a man who had all the cards. "McCrae, I know you're in there. Come on out. We need to talk." Owen didn't move. He looked at Denali, made a decision. The kind of decision he'd sworn 4 years ago he'd never make again. "The back room," he said quietly. "There's a closet. Get in it. Don't come out no matter what you hear. I won't hide while you face them. You will. Because if Luther takes you, you hang. But if he just talks to me, maybe we both live through this." Denali hesitated, then nodded once. She moved into the back room. Owen heard the closet door close softly. He took a breath, let it out slowly. Then he opened the front door and stepped outside. Luther Price sat his horse easy reins loose in one hand. He was 48 now, gray in his beard, leather skin, eyes like chips of flint. Behind him, 4 other men. Owen didn't recognize them. Professional guns by the look of them. Hard men paid to do hard work. "Luther," Owen said, keeping his voice neutral. "Owen McCrae." Luther smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Been a long time. 4 years. About that." "You look good. Sober suits you. What do you want, Luther? Can't a man visit an old friend?" We weren't friends. Luther's smile thinned. No, I suppose we weren't. You see, friends don't disobey orders. Friends don't let enemy combatants escape. Friends don't get their whole unit dishonorably discharged because they got soft. Owen said nothing, just waited. Luther dismounted, walked closer, stopped about 10 feet away. We're tracking an Apache woman, Denali. Escaped from custody yesterday, killed an Indian agent. You seen her? No. You sure about that? Because her trail led right to your river, right to where you set those fish traps. River's 8 miles long through this valley, could have crossed anywhere. Luther nodded slowly, like he was considering that. Then his eyes moved to Owen's wet boots, the water stains on his pants. You go for a swim this morning, Owen, checking traps. In the dark. Best time before the sun comes up. Luther walked past Owen toward the cabin door. Owen stepped sideways, blocking him. You got a warrant, Luther? Don't need one. I'm a licensed bounty hunter, pursuing a fugitive. That gives me the right to search any structure, not without probable cause. The wet clothes are probable cause. They stood facing each other. Owen didn't move. Luther's hand drifted toward the gun at his hip. Behind him, the 4 other men shifted in their saddles, hands moving to weapons. You really want to do this, Owen? You really want to die protecting a woman you claim you haven't seen? I don't want anyone to die. I want you to get off my land. For a long moment, nobody moved. The tension stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Then Luther smiled again. This time it looked more genuine and more dangerous. All right, we'll go, but I'll be back, Owen, with a real warrant. And when I come back, if I find you've been lying to me, hiding a fugitive that makes you an accomplice, you know what happens to accomplices. I can guess. Good. Then you know what you're risking. Luther mounted his horse, started to turn away, then stopped. One more thing. You remember Franklin Thorne? Owen's face showed nothing, but something cold moved through his chest. The contractor from Skeleton Canyon. That's right. Well, turns out Mr. Thorne's done real well for himself. He's a territorial senator now. Very powerful, very connected. Luther leaned forward in his saddle. And he's real interested in making sure certain things from the old days stay buried. You understand what I'm saying. I understand you're threatening me. Not threatening. Informing. See, Thorne's willing to pay good money to anyone who helps keep the past where it belongs, and he's willing to pay even better money to make sure people who might talk don't get the chance. Luther straightened. You got 24 hours, Owen. After that, I come back with the warrant. And if that woman's here, you're both done. He turned his horse and rode away. The 4 other men followed. Owen stood there watching them disappear down the trail until the dust settled and the morning was quiet again. Then he went back inside. Denali was already out of the closet, standing in the main room. He knows I'm here. Probably. He'll be back. Definitely. You should have let him search. You could have said I forced you to hide me. You could have been safe. Owen poured himself another cup of coffee. His hands were steady. That surprised him. 15 years ago, his hands had shaken all the time. Now they were steady, even now, even after facing down Luther Price and 4 armed men. I stopped trying to be safe a long time ago, he said. Denali sat down at the table. She looked exhausted suddenly, the adrenaline draining out of her. Why are you helping me? Owen sat down across from her. You said you came here to collect a debt, that I owed you because I didn't kill you. Well, maybe I figure I owe more than that. Maybe I figure I owe you for every person who died at Skeleton Canyon while I stood there too drunk and too cowardly to do anything. You can't pay that debt. No, but I can stop adding to it. They sat in silence. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the window. Owen could hear birds outside, normal morning sounds, like this was a normal morning. He mentioned Franklin Thorne, Denali said. I heard. The man who ordered Skeleton Canyon. The man who paid your unit to massacre my people. Yes. He's a senator now. Apparently. Denali's hands clenched into fists on the table. And he wants me dead because I killed his nephew. Owen looked up sharply. Virgil Crane was Thorne's nephew. I didn't know when I killed him. I learned after, from Luther when he was hunting me. He told me, said Thorne took it personal. Then this isn't just about you murdering an Indian agent. This is about Thorne covering up his whole corrupt operation and eliminating anyone who knows about Skeleton Canyon. They looked at each other across the table, understanding settling between them like a weight. We're both dead, Denali said quietly. You know that. He'll send more men. Better men. We can't fight a territorial senator. Maybe we can't fight him, but maybe we don't have to. What do you mean? Owen stood, paced to the window. He was thinking, really thinking. For the first time in 4 years, his mind felt clear, sharp, not fogged with whiskey or guilt. Luther said Thorne wants to keep the past buried. That means there's something in the past that could hurt him, something he's afraid of coming out. The massacre, yes, but more than that. The fact that he ordered it, that he paid soldiers to kill civilians so he could steal land. That's not just bad, that's criminal, even out here. Denali came to stand beside him at the window. You want to expose him. I want to make sure if we go down, we take him with us. How? I don't know yet. But Luther gave us 24 hours. That's longer than he needed to give us, which means he wants something. What? He wants me to run, to take you and disappear. That's easier for everyone. Easier for Luther, easier for Thorne. No messy arrests, no trials, no chance for things to come out in public. So we don't run. No, we make it as public as possible. Denali smiled. It was the first time Owen had seen her smile. It was not a pleasant expression. I like that plan. There's someone we need to talk to first. In Bitter Creek, a woman named Marisol. Who is she? Owen hesitated. Someone I trust. Maybe the only person left who I trust. They prepared quickly. Owen gave Denali clean clothes, pants and a shirt that had belonged to him rolled up at the sleeves and ankles, a hat to hide her face. They looked like what they were, 2 people on the run, but that was fine. That was the truth anyway. Before they left, Denali stopped Owen at the door. At Skeleton Canyon, she said. When you let me go, I never thanked you. You don't need to thank me for not murdering a child. No, but I need to tell you something. That night changed me. I spent 4 years learning how to fight, how to track, how to kill. Because I knew someday I'd have to face men like Luther, like Thorne, like all of you. She met his eyes. But I also spent 4 years looking for you, wondering if you were real, if there was really a soldier who chose mercy when everyone else chose violence. I needed to know if people could change. And now you know, now I know they can try. They rode out together as the sun climbed higher, Owen on his horse, Denali riding double behind him. They took the long way into town, avoiding the main trail, keeping to the washes and the rocky ground where tracks wouldn't show. Bitter Creek wasn't much of a town, maybe 200 people. A single street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a scattering of houses. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, where strangers were noticed, where an Apache woman would stand out like blood on snow. Owen stopped at the edge of town in a stand of cottonwoods by the creek. Wait here, he said. No, I'm coming with you. Marisol's store is right on the main street. In daylight, someone will see you. Then let them see. Denali, I am done hiding Owen. I told you that. He looked at her, at the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, and he remembered being young like that, certain like that. Before the war and the whiskey had taught him that certainty was just another word for foolishness. But he nodded. All right. But keep your head down. And if shooting starts, you run. I don't run. Yes, you do. Because if you die here, Thorne wins. And I'm not letting that happen. They walked into Bitter Creek together. Owen half expected someone to shout, to point, to raise an alarm. But people just glanced at them and looked away. 2 dusty travelers. Nothing unusual in a border town. Marisol's store was at the north end of the street. A simple building, wood-frame tin roof. A sign that read, Reyes General Store. Owen had been coming here for supplies for 3 years, long enough that Marisol knew his habits, Knew he paid in cash. Knew he didn't linger. Knew there was something in his past he didn't talk about. The bell over the door chimed as they entered. The store was empty except for one woman behind the counter, Marisol Reyes, 32 years old, dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, strong hands, eyes that missed nothing. She looked up, saw Owen, then saw Denali. Her expression didn't change, but Owen saw her hands move slightly under the counter where she kept a shotgun. "Owen," she said, her voice calm, neutral. "Marisol, we need to talk. I'm listening. Not here, somewhere private." Marisol's eyes moved to Denali, back to Owen. "Is she the one Luther Price is looking for?" "Yes." "Then talking to you makes me an accomplice. I know, I'm sorry, but you're the only person in this town I trust." For a long moment Marisol didn't move. Then she reached under the counter. Owen tensed. But she didn't pull out the shotgun. She pulled out a key, tossed it to him. "The back room. Go. I'll lock the front door. Make it look like I closed for lunch." They went into the back room, a small storage space with crates of goods waiting to be shelved, one window barred, one door to an alley. Marisol followed them in, locked the door behind her. "Talk fast," she said. "I'm risking everything just having you here." Owen told her. Not everything, but enough. Skeleton Canyon. Denali's revenge on Virgil Crane. Luther hunting them. Thorne pulling the strings, the 24 hours they had before Luther came back with a warrant. When he finished, Marisol was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. "My cousin died 3 weeks ago at San Carlos." Owen felt his stomach drop. Marisol. Her name was Rosa. She was 8 years old. She starved to death because Virgil Crane sold the rations that were supposed to feed her. Marisol looked at Denali. "So when you tell me you killed him, I have to ask myself, do I feel bad about that?" And the answer is no, I don't. Denali said nothing, just watched Marisol with those flat, dark eyes. "But," Marisol continued, "that doesn't mean I can help you. Owen, you're asking me to go against the law, against powerful men. If I do that, I lose this store. Maybe I lose my life." "I know. That's why I'll understand if you say no." Marisol walked to the window, looked out at the alley. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "My husband used to say that some debts can't be paid, only carried. Rosa's death is that kind of debt. I carry it every day, knowing that I could have done something, could have spoken up about the corruption at San Carlos. But I didn't, because I was afraid." She turned back to them. "I'm still afraid, but I'm more afraid of carrying another death, of looking back and knowing I could have helped and didn't." "So you'll help us?" Owen asked. "I'll help you, but not here. Too dangerous." She thought for a moment. "There's a priest, Father Anton. He used to be an army chaplain. He knows about Skeleton Canyon. He carries his own guilt about it. If anyone can help you figure out how to fight Thorne, it's him." "Where do we find him?" "The old mission, 2 miles east of town. Go after dark. I'll send word that you're coming." Owen nodded. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If this goes wrong, we all hang together." They left through the back door. Marisol stayed behind, waiting a few minutes before reopening the store, making it look natural. Owen and Denali made their way back to the cottonwoods, waited for nightfall. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. They both knew what was coming. The fight. The reckoning. The moment when running would stop being an option. As the sun began to set, Denali spoke. "When we get to the mission, when we make our plan, there's something you need to know." "What?" "I didn't just come here to see if you'd changed. I came here because I need your help for something else." "What?" She reached into her shirt, pulled out a small leather pouch, opened it. Inside were folded papers, ledgers, covered in numbers and names. "I took these from Virgil Crane's office before I killed him. They show everything. Money transfers from Thorne, payments to corrupt agents, proof of the embezzlement, the starvation, all of it." Owen stared at the papers. "This could destroy Thorne." "Yes, if we can get it to the right people. That's why Luther really wants me dead, not just for killing Crane, for having these." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I needed to know if I could trust you first. if you were still the man who let a girl live, or if you'd become someone who'd sell me out to save himself. And now, Denali looked at him, really looked at him. Now I think you're someone who might actually help me finish this, not because you want redemption, but because you want to stop running. They rode toward the mission as darkness fell. Behind them, back at Owen's ranch, a figure emerged from the rocks. Luther Price. He'd been watching the cabin all day, watching to see if Owen would run, watching to see if he'd lead them to Denali. And now he had his answer. Luther mounted his horse, rode back toward his camp where the other 4 men waited. He was smiling. "They took the bait," he said. "McCrae's helping her, and they're heading for the old mission. Get the men ready. We move at midnight." One of the other men spoke up. "You want us to take them alive." Luther thought about that, about Franklin Thorne's orders, about the money waiting for him when this was finished, about the loose ends that needed to be tied off clean. "No," he said. "Shoot on sight, both of them. Make it look like they resisted. Thorne wants this buried deep. Dead men don't talk. And neither do dead Apache women." They rode into the gathering dark, hunters and hunted, all moving toward the same point, the old Spanish mission where Father Anton waited, where prayers had been said for 200 years, where blood had been spilled before and would be spilled again. Owen didn't know Luther was following. Not yet. But some part of him knew anyway, the part that had survived 4 years of war and 4 years of guilt. The part that understood that running never really worked, that the past always caught up, that the only choice was how you faced it when it did. He rode with Denali through the desert night. The stars were coming out overhead, sharp and cold and distant. The same stars that had watched over Skeleton Canyon 4 years ago, the same stars that would watch whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, Owen McCrae wasn't running toward something or away from something. He was just riding into the dark, into the unknown, with a woman who had every reason to hate him and no reason to trust him, toward a reckoning that had been 4 years in the making. The night breathed around them. The desert held its secrets close. And somewhere ahead in the ruins of an old mission, their future was waiting to be written. In blood or in justice, maybe both. They would know soon enough. The old Spanish mission stood alone in the desert 2 miles east of Bitter Creek. Its walls were adobe, crumbling in places where time and weather had worn through. The bell tower rose against the night sky, empty of bells home, now only to bats and owls. Generations of priests had prayed here once. Now it belonged to the silence and the wind. Owen and Denali approached on foot, leading their horse. The moon was up nearly full, turning the desert silver. Every rock cast a shadow. Every shadow could hide a man with a gun. Father Anton was waiting in the nave, a single candle burning on what remained of the altar. He was younger than Owen expected, maybe 42, dark hair going gray at the temples, soft hands that had never done hard labor. But his eyes were old, haunted in the way Owen recognized, the way his own eyes looked in the mirror. "Owen McCrae," the priest said, not a question. "Marisol said you'd come, Father. And you must be Denali." Father Anton's eyes moved to her. Something passed across his face. Recognition, maybe, or guilt. "I was there, at Skeleton Canyon. I gave last rites to the dying. I blessed bodies I should have protected while they lived." Denali said nothing, just watched him with that flat stare. "We need help," Owen said. "Marisol told me. She said Luther Price is hunting you, that Franklin Thorne wants you dead." Father Anton gestured to the broken pews. "Sit. Tell me everything." They sat in that ruined church, and Owen told the story, all of it this time, the full truth. How his unit had been hired by Thorne to clear Apache from land near a silver claim. How the orders had been to make it look like tribal warfare. No survivors, no witnesses. How Owen had been drunk through most of it trying to make the work bearable. How he'd let a 13-year-old girl escape and lost everything for it. Denali added her piece. How she'd survived. How she'd learned her father had been murdered by Luther Price personally. How she'd spent 4 years preparing for revenge. How that revenge had led her to Virgil Crane. How killing Crane had pulled back the curtain on something much bigger. When they finished, Father Anton was quiet for a long time. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit desert. "I've prayed every day for 15 years, he said. Prayed for guidance, for forgiveness, for some way to make amends for what I witnessed and did nothing to stop." He turned back to them. "Maybe this is God's answer. Maybe this is how I finally do something that matters." "Can you help us?" Owen asked. "I can try, but you need to understand what you're up against. Franklin Thorne isn't just a senator. He owns half the territorial legislature. He has the governor in his pocket, judges, marshals, the whole system." "We know," Denali said. "That's why we need to go around the system. How?" She pulled out the ledgers, spread them on a pew. Father Anton came closer, holding the candle to read. His face changed as he saw the numbers, the names, the proof of systematic theft and murder. "Dear God," he whispered. "This is everything. Payments to Crane, payments to other agents, kickbacks to officials. It's all here." "Can we use it?" Owen asked. "Against Thorne directly?" "Maybe, but he'll claim they're forgeries. His lawyers will tie it up in courts he controls. You need more than paper. You need testimony. Someone who was there, someone who can connect Thorne directly to the orders." "Luther," Owen said. "He'll never testify against Thorne." "He will if the alternative is worse." Father Anton looked at Owen, really looked at him. "You mean to capture him?" "I mean to make him choose between Thorne and his own neck. That's dangerous. Luther has men, guns, experience." "So do I." "Owen." Father Anton's voice was gentle. "I read your discharge papers. You were a scout, not a soldier. You tracked. You observed. You didn't fight." "No. I ran, but I'm done running now." Denali stood. "We don't have time for this. Luther gave us 24 hours. Most of that's gone. He'll be coming soon with that warrant. We need a plan." Owen nodded. She was right. They were wasting time on philosophy when what they needed was tactics. "Father," he said, "if we could get Luther to confess, on record with witnesses, would that be enough to convict Thorne?" "Maybe, if the witnesses were credible, if we could get the confession to a federal authority, not territorial." "Who's federal?" "There's a U.S. Marshal, Catherine Doyle. She operates out of Tucson. She's investigated corruption before. If you could get Luther's confession to her, she'd listen." "How long to get to Tucson?" 2 days hard riding. We don't have 2 days." They were all quiet thinking. The candle flickered. Somewhere in the bell tower an owl called. "Hunting." Father Anton spoke first. "There might be another way. Catherine Doyle is scheduled to be in Bitter Creek tomorrow. There's a land dispute case. She's coming to take depositions." Owen and Denali looked at each other. Tomorrow. That was cutting it close. Very close. "If Luther comes with the warrant before she arrives," Owen said slowly, "we're done. He'll arrest us or kill us. Either way, the ledgers disappear and Thorne wins." "Unless we don't wait for him to come to us," Denali said. Owen turned to her. "What are you thinking? We go to him, tonight, before he expects it. We take the fight to Luther on our terms, not his. That's suicide." "So is waiting." Father Anton cleared his throat. "There is. There's something else you should know. Something Marisol asked me to tell you if you came." He paused. "Luther isn't camping outside town like you might think. He's staying at the hotel, in Bitter Creek, with his men, right in the open." Owen felt something cold move through his chest. Why? Because he wants people to see him. He wants witnesses to say he did everything legal, showed the warrant, gave you a chance to surrender. And when you didn't, he had no choice but to use force. "It's a setup," Denali said. "He's building his story, making sure when we die it looks justified." "Yes." Owen stood, paced the length of the nave. His mind was working now, really working. thinking tactically for the first time in years. "How many people in Bitter Creek know what Thorne did?" he asked Father Anton. "Know for certain, maybe a dozen. Suspect many more. But they're afraid. Thorne has power. He's ruined people before." What if they weren't afraid? What if they had protection? What kind of protection? The kind that comes from numbers, and witnesses, and sunlight. Owen turned to face them both. "Luther wants to do this public." "Fine, we'll give him public, but on our terms." He outlined his plan. It was desperate, probably stupid, almost certainly going to get them killed, but it was better than waiting to die. When he finished, Father Anton was shaking his head. "That's insane." "You have a better idea." "No, but this requires trust, from people who have every reason not to trust anyone." "That's where you come in, Father. You talk to them, tonight. Before Luther moves, we need bodies, witnesses, people willing to stand. Against a territorial senator, against injustice. Isn't that what you've been praying for? A chance to do something that matters?" Father Anton was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, I'll try. But, Owen, you need to understand. Even if this works, even if we get Luther's confession and get it to Marshal Doyle, Thorne has resources, lawyers, political power. He might not go to prison. I know, but he'll be exposed. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just dragging something into the light kills it." They left the mission separately, Father Anton heading back to town to gather the people he trusted, Owen and Denali riding wide, circling around to approach Bitter Creek from the south. As they rode, Denali spoke. "You didn't tell him everything." "No." "You didn't tell him that even if this works, even if we survive, I'm still a murderer. I'll still hang for killing Crane." Owen was quiet for a while. Then he said, "One problem at a time. That's not a plan." "No, but it's all I've got right now." They rode on through the silver darkness. The desert spread around them vast and indifferent. Above the stars watched the same stars that had watched every violence and every kindness this land had ever known. Denali spoke again, softer now. "At Skeleton Canyon, when you let me go, did you know what it would cost you?" "No, I was too drunk to know anything." "But you did it anyway." "I did it because I couldn't not do it. Because even drunk, even scared, I knew shooting a child was wrong. That's not heroic. That's just the bare minimum of being human." Most men don't manage even that. No, they don't. They were quiet after that, each lost in their own thoughts, their own memories of that night 15 years ago when their lives had intersected in fire and blood. Bitter Creek was dark when they reached it. Most houses had their lamps out. Only the saloon showed light and the hotel where Luther and his men were staying. Owen and Denali left their horse tied in an alley behind Marisol's store. Marisol was waiting for them in the back room, and she wasn't alone. There were 6 other people crowded into that small space. Owen recognized some of them: the blacksmith, the woman who ran the boarding house, a Mexican ranch hand who worked for one of the spreads outside town, a young white man Owen didn't know, an older Apache woman who cleaned houses, and standing slightly apart, watching everything with careful eyes, another Apache man younger, maybe 30. "These are the people I trust," Marisol said quietly. "The people who know what Thorne did, what Crane did. The people who've lost family to San Carlos." The older Apache woman spoke. Her English was heavily accented but clear. "I am Rosa's mother, Marisol's aunt. My granddaughter starved because that man stole food meant for children. If you fight him, I stand with you." One by one the others spoke. Each had their story. Each had their reason for being there. Each had been waiting for someone to make a stand. Owen looked at their faces. These weren't fighters. They were shopkeepers and laborers, people with families and jobs and everything to lose. But they were here, ready to risk it. "Thank you," he said. "All of you. But I need you to understand what you're risking. If this goes wrong, Thorne will destroy you. He'll take your livelihoods, maybe your lives, and he has the power to do it." The blacksmith, a big man with scarred hands, spoke up. "We know, but some things are worth the risk. My sister died at San Carlos 2 years ago. I've been carrying that, knowing I should have done something, should have spoken up. I'm done carrying it alone." The others murmured agreement. Owen nodded. "All right, then here's what we're going to do." He laid out the plan in detail. It was simple, maybe too simple. But complicated plans had more ways to fail. Tomorrow morning, just after dawn, they would gather in front of the hotel. All of them, armed if they could be, but that wasn't the point. The point was witnesses, bodies, people who couldn't be disappeared or ignored. They would call Luther out, force him to make his move in public in daylight where everyone could see. Father Anton would be there to document everything. He kept records, official church records. Whatever happened would be written down, witnessed, dated. And if Luther wanted to arrest Owen and Denali, he'd have to do it in front of a crowd, have to explain why, have to show the warrant, have to justify himself. That's when they'd produce the ledgers. That's when they'd make their accusation, public, loud, impossible to ignore. And if they could get Luther angry enough, scared enough, maybe he'd slip. Maybe he'd say something incriminating, something that could be used. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. The young white man Owen didn't know raised his hand. What if he just starts shooting? He has 4 men with him, professional guns. We're not fighters. He won't shoot, Owen said. Not in front of witnesses, not in the middle of town. He needs this to look legal. That's his weakness. He cares what people think. You sure about that? No, but it's the best chance we have. They talked for another hour, working out details. Who would stand where? What would be said? How to respond if Luther tried different tactics. It was like planning a battle, except their weapons were words and witnesses instead of guns and bullets. Finally, near midnight, they dispersed, slipping out of Marisol's store 1 or 2 at a time, going home to whatever sleep they could manage, knowing that tomorrow might be the last morning some of them saw. Owen and Denali stayed behind with Marisol. "You should rest," Marisol said. "There's a cot in the back. It's not much, but it's better than the floor." "What about you?" Owen asked. "I'll keep watch. Make sure Luther doesn't decide to move early." Denali spoke up. "I'll take first watch. You sleep, Marisol. You've done enough." Marisol looked at her, really looked at her. "You killed the man who murdered my cousin. I should be grateful, but instead, I'm just sad that it had to come to that our system failed so completely that the only justice was a knife in the dark." "I'm not sorry I killed him," Denali said. "I know. I'm not asking you to be. I'm just saying. I'm sad it was necessary." They were quiet after that. Marisol showed them the cot, brought water and food. Then she went upstairs to her small apartment above the store. Owen lay down, knowing he should sleep, knowing he'd need rest for what was coming, but sleep wouldn't come. He stared at the ceiling, listening to Denali moving quietly around the room, checking the windows, the doors, her knife always in hand. "You don't have to watch," he said. "Luther won't move tonight. He thinks he has us trapped. He'll wait for morning when he can do it legal." "Maybe, but I don't trust easy. I've noticed." She came and sat on the floor near the cot, her back against the wall, positioned where she could see both the front and back doors. "Tell me about Marisol," she said. "What about her? You trust her. That's rare for you. Why?" Owen thought about that. 3 years ago, I came into town to buy supplies. I was still drinking then, still trying to drown what I'd done. I got drunk in the saloon, started a fight, nearly killed a man. He paused, remembering. Sheriff was going to lock me up, maybe worse, but Marisol stepped in, paid my tab, paid for the damages, took me back to her store and let me sleep it off. And when I woke up, she didn't lecture me, didn't tell me to change, just said, "Next time you feel like drowning, come talk to me instead. Drowning alone is too easy." "And you stopped drinking?" "Not right away, but eventually. She didn't give up on me, even when I'd given up on myself." Denali was quiet, processing that. Then she said, "My father used to say that some people are broken by violence. Some people are made by it, and a very few people are transformed by it into something different than they were before. Which kind are you?" I don't know yet. Ask me when this is over. And me? She looked at him in the darkness. You're still being made. The clay isn't dry yet. They lapsed into silence. Outside, the town slept, or pretended to sleep. Owen wondered how many people were lying awake right now, knowing what was coming, knowing that tomorrow would change Bitter Creek forever, one way or another. Near 3 a.m, Denali spoke again. If this goes wrong tomorrow, if Luther kills us, the ledgers are in my saddlebag. Make sure Marisol gets them to that Marshal Doyle. You'll give them to her yourself. Maybe, but if I don't, promise me. I promise. And Owen, if I die tomorrow, don't let it be for nothing. Don't let Thorne walk away from this. He won't. One way or another, he won't. She seemed satisfied with that. She leaned her head back against the wall, closed her eyes, not sleeping, just resting. Owen watched her in the dim light from the street. This woman who had every reason to hate him, who had spent 4 years preparing to avenge her father, who had killed a man and would probably hang for it even if they survived tomorrow. And he thought about the girl he'd let escape at Skeleton Canyon, thought about the split-second decision that had cost him everything, his career, his reputation, his sense of purpose. But looking at Denali, now seeing the strength in her, the determination, the refusal to bow. Owen realized something. Letting that girl live was the only thing he'd done in his entire life that he was truly proud of. Everything else, the scouting, the tracking the service, had all been leading to this moment, to this choice, to this stand. Maybe Father Anton was right. Maybe this was God's answer to 4 years of prayer. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but a chance to do something that mattered, to face the thing he'd run from, and finally stop running. Dawn came slow and red, the kind of sunrise that looked like blood, like a warning. Owen and Denali were up before the light preparing, checking weapons, going over the plan one more time. Marisol brought coffee and cornbread. Nobody talked much. There wasn't much to say. At 6, Father Anton arrived. He'd been up all night too, talking to people, preparing them. He looked exhausted but determined. They'll come, he said. Everyone I talk to, they'll be there. How many? Owen asked. 20, maybe 25, not just the ones from last night. Others, people who've been waiting for someone to make a stand. That was good. Better than Owen had hoped. 25 witnesses would be hard to ignore, hard to intimidate. At 6:30 they began to gather, not all at once. That would draw attention too soon, but in ones and twos, drifting toward the hotel, taking positions, trying to look casual. By 7, the street in front of the hotel had maybe 30 people on it. Not all together. Spread out, but clearly there, clearly waiting. Owen and Denali were the last to arrive. They walked straight down the middle of the main street, not hiding, not sneaking. Just walking, like they had every right to be there. Luther saw them from the hotel window. Owen watched him stand up, say something to his men, watched him strap on his gun belt, and come to the door. The two groups faced each other across maybe 30 feet of dusty street. Luther and his 4 men on the hotel porch, Owen and Denali in the street. And behind them, around them, the witnesses, the townspeople, the people who'd been silent too long. Luther stepped down off the porch. His face was calm, but Owen could see the calculation in his eyes. This wasn't what he'd expected. This wasn't part of his plan. "McCrae," Luther said, his voice loud enough to carry, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're making this harder than it needs to be. I have a warrant for you and for the woman. You can come peaceful or you can resist, but either way you're coming. Show me the warrant." Luther pulled a folded paper from his coat, held it up. "Right here. Signed by Territorial Judge Markham. Legal and proper." Judge Markham, who owns stock in Franklin Thorne's mining company. Owen said it loud. For the crowd, for the witnesses. Luther's face hardened. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm implying that this warrant isn't about justice. It's about Thorne covering up what he did at Skeleton Canyon." A murmur went through the crowd. Some of them knew about Skeleton Canyon, some didn't. But they all heard the name, all heard the accusation. Luther's hand drifted toward his gun. "You're confused, McCrae, maybe from all those years of drinking. There was no Skeleton Canyon. Nothing happened there that wasn't legal military action." "Legal military action," Owen laughed. It was a bitter sound. "Is that what Thorne told you to call it, murdering unarmed Apache to steal their land for a silver claim? That's slander. It's truth, and I can prove it." Denali stepped forward. She held up the ledgers. "These show every payment Franklin Thorne made. To you, to Virgil Crane, to every corrupt official who helped him steal from San Carlos, every child who starved, every family who died. It's all here, documented, dated, in Thorne's own hand." Luther's face went white, then red. "Those are forgeries." "Then you won't mind if we show them to a federal marshal, Catherine Doyle. She's in town today. Let's let her decide if they're real." "You're not showing those to anyone." Luther's hand closed on his gun. "You're both under arrest, and those papers are evidence that I'm confiscating right now." Owen stepped in front of Denali. "You'll have to go through me first." The street went silent. 30 people holding their breath. Luther's 4 men spreading out hands on weapons. This was the moment. The point where words became violence, where this could all go bad. Then a voice spoke from the crowd. The blacksmith. "I'm a witness. I see everything that happens here, and I'll testify to it." Another voice. Rosa's mother. "I am witness too." One by one the townspeople spoke, declaring themselves, making themselves part of this. No longer silent, no longer afraid. Luther looked at them, looked at Owen and Denali, looked at his men. Owen could see him calculating, trying to figure out how to salvage this, how to do what Thorne wanted without creating a bloodbath in the middle of town with 36 witnesses. He couldn't. There was no way. Luther's hand came away from his gun. His face settled into something cold and controlled. "Fine. We'll do this legal. We'll take you to Judge Markham. Let him sort it out. But those ledgers come with us as evidence." "The ledgers go to Marshal Doyle," Owen said, "not to a judge in Thorne's pocket." "Nee, that's not your choice." "It is now." They were at an impasse. Luther knew it, Owen knew it, the whole town knew it. Then someone else spoke, a woman's voice, strong, authoritative, coming from behind the crowd. "Actually, I'll take those ledgers, if you don't mind." Everyone turned. A woman was walking up the street, maybe 45, wearing a long coat despite the morning heat, a U.S. Marshal's badge pinned to her vest, a gun at her hip that she clearly knew how to use. Marshal Catherine Doyle had arrived early. She walked straight through the crowd, nodding to Father Anton as she passed. She'd clearly been briefed, clearly knew what she was walking into. She stopped between Owen and Luther, looked at them both. "I'm U.S. Marshal Catherine Doyle. I've been investigating Franklin Thorne for federal crimes related to the San Carlos Reservation, and I have a few questions." She turned to Denali. "You're the woman who killed Virgil Crane." "Yes." "And you have evidence of embezzlement of federal funds." "Yes." "May I see it?" Denali hesitated, looked at Owen. He nodded. She handed the ledgers to Marshal Doyle. The marshal flipped through them. Her face remained neutral, but Owen saw her eyes sharpen, saw her understanding what she was looking at. "Mr. Price," she said, not looking up from the ledgers, "do you work for Franklin Thorne?" "I'm a licensed bounty hunter. I work for whoever pays." "And Thorne is paying you to bring in Miss Denali here, preferably dead." "I have a legal warrant from a territorial judge. I have federal jurisdiction, which supersedes territorial in cases involving federal reservations and federal employees. Virgil Crane was a federal employee. San Carlos is a federal reservation. This is my case now." Luther's face went dark. "You can't do that." "I just did. Now. You can either cooperate with my investigation, or I can arrest you for obstruction. Your choice." For a long moment, Luther didn't move. Owen could see him thinking, weighing his options, wondering how much Thorne would pay to get him out of federal custody, wondering if it was worth it. Then he made his choice. Luther's hand dropped to his gun. Fast. Practiced. But not fast enough. Marshal Doyle's pistol was out and aimed before Luther cleared leather. "Don't!" Luther froze. His men froze. Everyone froze. "Hands up," Doyle said. Calm. Professional. Slowly. Luther raised his hands. His men did the same. Doyle looked at Father Anton. "Father, would you mind collecting their weapons carefully?" Father Anton moved forward, taking guns from Luther and his men. His hands shook, but he did it. When they were all disarmed, Marshal Doyle spoke again. "Mr. Price, I'm arresting you and your men for attempted assault on a federal officer. You'll be held in federal custody pending investigation. If you cooperate, if you tell me everything you know about Franklin Thorne's operation, maybe we can work something out. If you don't, well, federal prison is a hard place." She looked at Owen and Denali. "You two aren't off the hook either. Owen McCrae, you aided a fugitive. Denali, you committed murder. But you're also witnesses to federal crimes. So here's my offer. You cooperate fully with my investigation. You testify truthfully about everything you know, and maybe, just maybe, we can find some leniency." "And Thorne?" Owen asked. "That depends on what's in these ledgers, and what Mr. Price here decides to tell me." She looked at Luther. "Last chance. You want to go down with Thorne, or do you want to save yourself?" Luther was quiet for a long time. Owen watched him, watched the calculations running behind his eyes, the weighing of loyalties against survival. Finally, Luther spoke. "I'll talk, but I want immunity, full immunity, and witness protection." "You're not in a position to bargain. I'm in the only position that matters. I know where the bodies are buried, literally. I know every crime Thorne's committed for the last 10 years, every murder, every theft, every corrupt official. You want him, you need me." Marshal Doyle considered that. "We'll discuss terms after you're in custody." She gestured, and 2 deputies Owen hadn't noticed appeared from the crowd. They'd been there the whole time, waiting. This had been planned, coordinated. As they led Luther and his men away, Luther looked back at Owen. Something passed between them. Not quite respect, not quite hatred, just recognition. 2 men who'd made different choices and were living with the consequences. The crowd began to disperse, talking, excited. They'd witnessed something, been part of something. The story would spread, would grow, would become legend. Marshal Doyle turned to Owen and Denali. "You two, with me. We need to talk, somewhere private." They followed her to Father Anton's church, sat in the same pews where they'd sat the night before. But now sunlight streamed through the broken windows. Everything looked different in daylight, more real, less dreamlike. "I've been investigating Thorne for 6 months, Doyle said, "ever since reports started coming out of San Carlos about missing supplies. But I couldn't get anyone to talk. Everyone was too scared, or too bought. These ledgers," she patted them, "these might finally be enough." "Might be," Denali said. "Thorne has good lawyers. He'll claim forgery, claim persecution. He'll tie this up in courts for years. But with Luther's testimony, with your testimony, with enough public pressure, we might be able to force a trial. And once we get him in a courtroom, once we get his crimes on public record, even if he doesn't go to prison, he's done, politically, socially, finished." "That's not enough," Denali said. "He should hang." "Maybe he should. But the law doesn't work on should. It works on what we can prove. And right now, what we can prove might put him in federal prison for 5 years. Maybe less with good behavior. That's reality." Denali stood, walked to the window, stared out at the desert beyond. "All those children," she said quietly. "All those families, and he gets 5 years. I know it's not justice, but it's something. It's more than he had yesterday, more than he'd have if you hadn't killed Crane, if Owen hadn't made a stand. Sometimes that's all we get. Small victories, incremental change. It's not enough." "No, but it's what we have." Owen spoke up. "What about us, Denali and me?" Marshal Doyle looked at them both. "Like I said, you're witnesses. You cooperate, you testify truthfully. I'll recommend leniency. Owen, You'll probably get probation for aiding a fugitive. Denali. She paused. Murder is murder, even when the victim deserved it. I can't make that go away. But I can make sure you get a fair trial. And I can make sure the jury knows the full context. Why you did what you did, what Crane did to your people. A good lawyer, sympathetic jury. You might get manslaughter instead of murder, time served instead of hanging. Might, Denali said. That's all I can offer. Denali turned from the window, looked at Owen. Something passed between them. Understanding. Acceptance. All right, she said. I'll testify. They spent the rest of the day giving depositions, telling Marshal Doyle everything, about Skeleton Canyon, about Thorne's orders, about the years of corruption, about Crane's crimes, about the ledgers. Father Anton added his testimony. Marisol added hers. One by one, the townspeople who'd witnessed the confrontation came forward, building a case, creating a record. By evening, Marshal Doyle had enough to move forward, enough to arrest Thorne, enough to force a reckoning. She left for Tucson that night with Luther in custody, taking the ledgers as evidence. She left 2 deputies in Bitter Creek to protect Owen and Denali until the trial. And she left them with a warning. Thorne has resources, money, connections. He'll fight this. And he'll come after you, both of you. Watch your backs. After she left, Owen and Denali stood in the street outside Father Anton's church. The sun was setting. That same blood red it had risen with. We did it, Denali said. Not celebration, just observation. We started it, Owen corrected. Now we have to finish it. The trial, yes. I might hang. You might, but you'll hang having told the truth. Having exposed Thorne, having made sure the next Indian agent thinks twice before stealing from children. Denali smiled, small, sad. Is that supposed to comfort me? No, but it's all I have. They walked back to Marisol's store. She fed them, let them sleep in the back room, stood watch while 2 people who'd been strangers 3 days ago tried to rest before tomorrow brought whatever it would bring. But Owen couldn't sleep. He lay on the cot staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened, everything still to come. Denali's voice came from the darkness. You awake? Yeah. You regret it helping me? Owen thought about that, really thought. No, for the first time in 4 years, I don't regret something. I'm proud of it. Even if it costs me everything, I'm proud. Good, you should be. Silence fell again, but it was different this time. Not the heavy silence of guilt and fear, but something lighter. The silence of 2 people who'd fought together and survived. For now. Tomorrow would bring new battles, the trial, the testimony, the reckoning with Thorne. But tonight in this moment they'd won something, small, fragile, but real. They'd stood, they'd spoken. They'd refused to run. And sometimes, Owen thought, as sleep finally began to take him, sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. 3 months passed like a slow bleed. Owen spent them in Bitter Creek under house arrest, not jail, but close enough. A deputy watched the boarding house where he stayed. Another deputy followed him when he went out for supplies. He couldn't leave town, couldn't work, couldn't do anything but wait for the trial that would decide whether he'd spend the next 2 years in prison or just on probation. Denali had been in the territorial jail in Tucson for 6 months. Not federal. Territorial. Because murder was a territorial crime, even when the victim was a federal employee. Marshal Doyle had fought to keep her in federal custody, but the territorial prosecutor had jurisdiction, and he'd exercised it. Owen visited her twice. The second time she told him to stop coming. Why, he'd ask through the bars. Because every time you come, I see the guilt in your eyes, like you think you should have saved me from this. She'd looked at him hard. You can't save me, Owen. I killed a man. That has consequences. I knew that when I did it. I accepted it. You need to accept it too. So he'd stopped visiting. But he thought about her every day, wondered if she was all right, wondered if the trial would go her way or if she'd hang. The news from Tucson wasn't good. Franklin Thorne had hired the best lawyers money could buy. They'd filed motions, challenged the ledgers as forgeries, questioned Marshall Doyle's jurisdiction, attacked Luther's credibility as a witness. And they'd gone after Denali hard, painted her as a savage, a murderer, a vengeful Apache who'd killed a good man doing his job. The newspapers ate it up. Some sided with Denali, especially the smaller papers that had no love for Thorne. But the big papers, the ones Thorne's associates owned or influenced, they painted her as a monster. Owen read every article, saved them in a folder that grew thicker each week, evidence of how the story was being twisted, how the truth was being buried under money and influence. He wasn't the only one watching. The townspeople of Bitter Creek watched too. And as they watched, something happened. Something Owen hadn't expected. They started to organize. It started small. A few people, mostly Mexican-Americans, and the Apache women who worked in town gathering to talk about what they'd witnessed, about what they knew, about what they wanted to do. Marisol was at the center of it. She turned her store into an unofficial headquarters, helped people write letters to newspapers, to federal officials, to anyone who might listen. Father Anton used his pulpit to preach about justice, about standing up for the powerless, about how silence in the face of evil was the same as participation. The blacksmith organized donations, money for Denali's defense, for a better lawyer than the public defender she'd been assigned. Slowly, week by week, Bitter Creek became something it had never been before, a community that cared about something beyond its own survival. But Thorne pushed back. The first sign came when the bank in town suddenly called in loans. 3 families lost their farms. 2 businesses went under. All of them people who'd stood in that street 3 months ago. People who'd witnessed Luther's arrest. The message was clear. This is what happens when you oppose me. Some people got scared, backed away, stopped coming to the meetings at Marisol's store. But others got angry, and anger Owen was learning could be just as powerful as fear, maybe more so. The trial started in early October. Federal charges against Franklin Thorne: embezzlement, conspiracy to defraud, obstruction of justice. The murder charges hadn't stuck. The massacre at Skeleton Canyon was too old, too hard to prove too many witnesses dead or disappeared. But the financial crimes were solid. The ledgers were real. Luther's testimony was damning. Marshall Doyle had built a good case. Owen watched from the gallery as the trial unfolded, day after day of testimony, witnesses, evidence. Thorne sitting at the defense table looking dignified, wounded, like he was the victim here. His lawyers were brilliant. They attacked every piece of evidence, every witness. They made Luther look like a mercenary who'd say anything for immunity. They made Marshall Doyle look like an overreaching federal agent with a vendetta. And slowly Owen watched the case start to crumble. Not collapse, but crack. Little fissures appearing in what had seemed like solid proof. The jury looked confused, overwhelmed, like they didn't know what to believe anymore. On the 8th day of testimony, Luther took the stand. Owen watched him walk to the witness box, watched him swear to tell the truth, watched him sit down and look at Thorne with something like regret in his eyes. The prosecutor, a federal attorney named Jameson, started with the easy questions: name, age, occupation, building a foundation. Then he got to the meat of it. Mr. Price, how long have you worked for Franklin Thorne? 10 years, since right after Skeleton Canyon. And what was your relationship with Mr. Thorne? He hired me, paid me to do jobs. What kind of jobs? Enforcement, collection, sometimes worse. Worse how Luther looked at the jury, at the judge, at Owen in the gallery. Sometimes he needed people to disappear, or to be convinced to stop talking, or to have accidents. A murmur went through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. Jameson continued, and the massacre at Skeleton Canyon, who ordered that? Thorne did, through our commanding officer, Colonel Hayes. Why? There was silver on Apache land. Thorne wanted it. The Apache wouldn't sell. So he decided to remove them. Remove them how? Kill them. Make it look like tribal warfare. Blame it on raids from Mexico. And you participated in this, yes. Wipa. For the first time, Luther's voice cracked slightly. Because I was a soldier, I followed orders. And because Thorne paid well, $20 a man. Extra for children. The courtroom erupted, people shouting, the judge banging his gavel hard enough to crack the wood. It took 5 minutes to restore order. When it was quiet again, Jameson asked the final question. Mr. Price, do you have any regret for what you did? Luther was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I don't know if I'm capable of regret anymore. I did terrible things for so long that the terrible became normal, but I know this. What we did at Skeleton Canyon was wrong, and Franklin Thorne ordered it, and he should pay for it. Thorne's lawyer stood for cross-examination. His name was Blackwell. Expensive suit, silver hair, voice like silk over steel. Mr. Price, you've been granted full immunity for your testimony today. Is that correct? Yes. So you can say anything, accuse anyone, and you'll face no consequences. That's not how immunity works. Isn't it? You're a confessed murderer, a man who admits to killing women and children for money, and in exchange for your testimony against my client, you walk free. That's the deal you made. Isn't it? I'm telling the truth. Are you? Or are you telling the story federal prosecutors want to hear so you can avoid the noose? Objection, Jameson said, badgering the witness. Sustained. But the damage was done. The jury looked at Luther differently now, suspicious, doubting. Blackwell pressed harder. You have no physical evidence that Mr. Thorne ordered anything. No documents, no witnesses besides yourself, just your word. The word of a killer who's saving his own skin. I'm telling the truth. You're telling a story, and you're very good at it. After all, you've been lying professionally for 10 years. The cross-examination went on for 2 days. Blackwell tore into Luther from every angle. By the time it was done, Luther looked broken, small, and his testimony looked shaky. But then the prosecution brought out the ledgers, Denali's ledgers, the ones she'd taken from Virgil Crane's office. Page after page of payments, dates, amounts, names. A handwriting expert testified that the handwriting was Thorne's. A forensic accountant showed how the money flowed, from Thorne's accounts to Crane's accounts to other accounts. A web of corruption laid out in black ink. It was damning, undeniable. But Thorne's lawyers had an answer for that too. They brought their own experts, their own accountants. They suggested the ledgers had been altered, suggested that even if they were real, they proved financial irregularities but not criminal intent. They turned what should have been a smoking gun into just another piece of disputed evidence. The trial dragged on for 3 weeks. Owen attended every day, watched the truth get twisted and reframed and spun until he wasn't sure anymore what was real and what was performance. On the final day, both sides gave closing arguments. Jameson spoke about justice, about holding the powerful accountable, about the children who'd starved while Thorne got rich. Blackwell spoke about reasonable doubt, about unreliable witnesses, about a rush to judgment against a respected public servant. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they came back, their verdict was split. Guilty on 3 counts of embezzlement, not guilty on conspiracy to commit murder. Hung jury on obstruction of justice. It was a partial victory, better than nothing, worse than what was deserved. The judge sentenced Thorne to 5 years in federal prison. With good behavior, he'd serve 3. 3 years for all those deaths, all that suffering. Denali's trial started a week later. Owen sat in the same gallery watching the same process unfold. But this trial was different, simpler. The facts weren't in dispute. Denali had killed Virgil Crane. She'd admitted it. The only question was whether it was murder or something else. Her lawyer, a young man named Rivera, who'd been paid by donations from Bitter Creek, argued justifiable homicide. He brought witnesses who testified about conditions at San Carlos, about the children who died, about Crane's theft and cruelty. He brought Rosa's mother. She testified about finding her granddaughter dead, about the empty food stores, about Crane laughing when she'd begged for help. He brought documents showing Crane's embezzlement, showing the systematic starvation of an entire reservation. And he argued that when the law fails to protect people, when the system itself is corrupt, individuals have the right to seek justice themselves. It was a dangerous argument, one that could justify vigilantism. But it was also powerful. The prosecutor argued that murder is murder, that the law doesn't allow for personal vengeance, that if everyone took justice into their own hands, society would collapse into chaos. Both arguments had merit. Both were true in their own way. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they came back, they looked tired, conflicted. The verdict, guilty of voluntary manslaughter. Not murder, but not innocent either. The judge looked at Denali for a long moment before sentencing. "Miss Denali, you took a life. That cannot be excused, but the circumstances, the suffering of your people, the failure of our systems, these things matter. I sentence you to 3 years in territorial prison. You've already served 3 months awaiting trial. That time counts toward your sentence. With good behavior and overcrowding considerations, you could be released in as little as 15 months total." Denali stood. She didn't look relieved or devastated, just accepting, like she'd known all along this was how it would end. As they led her out, she looked at Owen. Their eyes met. She nodded once. He nodded back. That was all. But it was enough. Owen's trial was last, and shortest. He'd aided a fugitive. He didn't deny it, didn't fight it. The judge, the same one who'd sentenced Denali, looked at him thoughtfully. "Mr. McCrae, you violated the law, but you did so for reasons that I understand, if not condone. 2 years probation, community service, and you're forbidden from leaving Arizona territory during that time. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. Try to stay out of trouble." Owen walked out of the courthouse a free man. Technically, he had no job, no income, no prospects, but he was free. Marisol was waiting outside. She'd closed her store to attend the sentencing. 2 years probation, Owen said. Could have been worse. Could have been better. Yeah. They walked through Tucson together. The city was busy, people going about their lives, buying things, selling things, laughing, fighting, living. "What will you do now?" Marisol asked. "I don't know. Find work somewhere. Try to rebuild. Come back to Bitter Creek." Owen looked at her. "Why? The town doesn't need me. I'm a reminder of bad things. The town needs people who stand up. We learned that these past 3 months. We learned what happens when good people do nothing, and we learned what's possible when they do something." She stopped walking, turned to face him. "I'm starting a cooperative, buying direct from Apache craftspeople, selling in town and beyond. Fair prices, honest dealing. I need someone I can trust, someone who knows both worlds." "I don't know anything about business. You know about integrity. That's harder to teach." Owen thought about that, about having a purpose again, about being part of something that mattered. "I'll think about it," he said. 3 months after the trials, Owen received a letter. It was from someone in Tucson, anonymous, but the handwriting was educated, careful. If you want to see what justice looks like, it read, "Come to the corner of Congress and Stone Street, Tuesday, noon." Owen showed the letter to Marisol. Could be a trap, or it could be someone who wants you to witness something, someone who was at the trial. Tuesday came. Owen rode to Tucson, found the corner, waited. At noon, a commotion started down the street, a crowd gathering. Owen moved closer. Franklin Thorne was being evicted from his house. Not arrested, not imprisoned, just evicted. His possessions being carried out and stacked on the street. Fine furniture, paintings, books, all piled like garbage. Thorne stood on the sidewalk shouting at the bailiffs, but his voice had lost its power. He looked old, broken, a man who'd fallen and couldn't get up. A woman walked past him, spat at his feet, kept walking. Then another and another. People who'd once feared him now showed nothing but contempt. Thorne's eyes swept the crowd, landed on Owen. For a moment they stared at each other. Thorne's face twisted with rage and humiliation. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But no words came. What could he say? What threats could he make? He had no power anymore, no money, no connections, nothing but the shame of public disgrace. Owen felt something release in his chest. Not satisfaction exactly, not joy, but closure. The kind that comes from watching a chapter end. He turned and walked away, left Thorne standing there amid the ruins of his life. Later, back in Bitter Creek, Denali asked him what he'd seen. Owen told her. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "My father used to say that true justice isn't what happens in courts. It's what happens in the eyes of your community, when people stop respecting you, stop fearing you, stop seeing you as anything but what you truly are." And what is Thorne? A small man who wanted to be big and failed. That night, Owen slept better than he had in 15 years. 15 months after the trials, the full term Denali had served Owen stood at the edge of the Gila River, the same spot where he'd found Denali that morning that felt like a lifetime ago. The seasons had changed. Fall was giving way to winter. The cottonwoods were bare. The water ran cold and clear. He heard footsteps behind him, turned. Denali. She looked different, thinner from prison, harder in some ways, but her eyes were the same. That flat, assessing stare that missed nothing. "They released you," Owen said, "right on schedule. Good behavior and overcrowding. They needed the space for actual criminals." "You are an actual criminal." "I know, but I'm an actual criminal who served her time. That counts for something." They stood side by side looking at the river, not touching, not speaking for a long moment. Finally, Denali broke the silence. "Thorne got out last week. Early release for medical reasons." Owen had heard. Everyone had heard. Thorne claiming heart problems. Doctors he'd paid swearing he might die in prison. A sympathetic judge granting compassionate release. 3 years. He'd served 3 years of a 5-year sentence. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "He's ruined, though," Owen said. "Lost his Senate seat. Lost his business partners. His name is poison now." "Is that enough for you?" "No, but it's what we got." Denali picked up a stone, threw it into the river, watched the ripples spread. "My father used to say that justice is like water. It finds its own level eventually. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes a different form than we expect. But it comes. Do you believe that?" "I'm trying to." More silence. Then Denali spoke again. "Marisol offered me a job at the cooperative. I know, I'm working there too. I heard. That's why I came back, to see if it was true, if the man who let me go at Skeleton Canyon would really be there, ready to work alongside the woman he should have killed." Owen looked at her. "I never should have killed you. Not then, not ever. I know. But a lot of men would have. You didn't. And then, when I needed help, you gave it, even though it cost you everything." She turned to face him fully. "I've spent 6 months in prison thinking about that, about why you did it, what it means. And I think you did it because you're trying to be better than you were, not for redemption, not for forgiveness, but just because being better is its own reward." Owen thought about that, about the 4 years he'd spent running, about the 3 months of trial, about the 6 months of probation, about all the things he'd lost and the few things he'd gained. "I don't feel better," he said. "I still carry what I did every day." "Good. You should. Some things shouldn't be forgotten." She paused. "But you can carry it differently, not as a weight that drags you down, but as a reminder of who you don't want to be again. Is that what you're doing with Crane?" "I'm trying. Some days are harder than others." They were quiet again. The river flowed on, indifferent to human pain and human justice, just water finding its level. Marisol appeared on the riverbank waving. "You two going to stand there all day? We have work to do." Owen and Denali looked at each other. Something passed between them. Not quite friendship, not quite forgiveness, but understanding, recognition. Two people who'd been broken by violence and were trying slowly, painfully to put themselves back together in a new shape. They walked toward Marisol together, toward work, toward purpose, toward a future that neither of them had imagined 6 months ago. Behind them, the river kept flowing, the desert kept breathing, the world kept turning. And two people who should have been enemies, who should have been nothing to each other, became something neither could name, but both could feel. Partners, allies, fellow travelers on a road neither had chosen, but both were walking anyway. At the cooperative, things were busy. Apache women bringing in baskets and pottery, Marisol negotiating prices, Father Anton helping with paperwork, the blacksmith's daughter learning bookkeeping. It was small, modest, nothing that would change the world, but it was honest. And in a place where honesty had been rare, that meant something. Owen found himself working alongside Denali most days. She knew the Apache craftspeople, knew their work, could spot quality and authenticity. He knew the white buyers in town, knew how to navigate that world without compromising. Together they built a bridge, imperfect, fragile, but real. One evening after everyone else had gone home, Owen and Denali sat on the porch of the cooperative. The sun was setting, that same blood red it always was in the desert. "Do you think we made a difference?" Denali asked. Owen considered that. "Thorne's out. Luther's free with immunity. Crane is dead, but his replacement is probably just as corrupt. The system is still broken." He paused. "But there are 20 families at San Carlos eating better because we exposed the embezzlement. There are people in Bitter Creek who learned they can stand up. There's this cooperative. Small things, but they matter. To who? To the people they help. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't get to save the world. Maybe we just get to save a few people, make a few things slightly better, leave the world a little less broken than we found it." Denali smiled, sad, knowing. "That's not very heroic." "No, but it's honest." They sat in silence as the stars came out, the same stars that had watched Skeleton Canyon, that had watched every violence and every kindness this land had ever known. Marisol joined them eventually, brought coffee. The three of them sat together, not talking much, just being present. And Owen realized something. This was redemption, not the dramatic kind, not the kind where past sins were washed away and he became pure again, but the slow, daily kind, the kind where you wake up every morning and choose to do something good, choose to help someone, choose to be better than you were yesterday. It wasn't forgiveness. He would never forgive himself for Skeleton Canyon, would never stop carrying those deaths, but it was purpose, direction, a way forward that didn't require running or hiding or drinking himself numb. It was, he thought, enough. Maybe not for a story, not for a legend, but for a life. And after everything, after all the violence and pain and loss, a life was what he wanted most. Not a grand life, not a heroic life, just a life lived honestly, with people he trusted, doing work that mattered even if only to a few. The night deepened, the desert cooled, and three people who'd been broken by the same system, the same violence, the same corruption sat together and found something like peace. Not perfect peace, not complete peace, but the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've done what you could, said what was true, stood when standing mattered. And sometimes, in a world as hard as this one, that's all the peace anyone gets. Denali spoke one more time before they parted for the night. "My father used to tell a story about a warrior who carried a great wound. The medicine man said the wound would never fully heal, but the warrior could choose, carry it as poison or carry it as medicine, as a reminder of what to avoid or what to protect." "Which did the warrior choose?" Owen asked. "Both. Some days poison, some days medicine. The wound was the same, but how he carried it changed." Owen understood. He was that warrior. They all were, carrying wounds that would never fully heal, but choosing day by day how to carry them, as weapons or as wisdom, as excuses or as armor. The choice was always there, always would be. And that, Owen thought, as he walked back to his small room above the cooperative, was both the burden and the blessing of being human. You carried your past, but you chose your future, one day, one choice, one small act of integrity at a time. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It had to be, because it was all anyone had. The desert night breathed around him. The stars watched. And Owen McCrae, former soldier, former drunk, former coward, walked forward into whatever came next. Not running, not hiding, just walking. And that finally was enough.